Welcome, everybody. This is the Ins Justify the Memes, the show where the lowest of the low, that is, the most wretched of the most wretched, the deplorable to end all deplorables, two heterosexual Christian males from the American South talk about culture, philosophy, history, health, fitness, and what it means to be a man in the 21st century. I'll be your host, Bill, and this is my producer and co host, Tank. So crack open a beer and lend us your ear because the ends always justify the memes. How we doing, Tank? We're going with 8%ers again?
Yeah. No. 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 This is gonna be all. This is just standard old 5% good old American beer.
So Tank and I both ended up having more than we would like to last week. But such things happen. Such things happen. So today we're going to talk about the lovely Smithsonian of America and their article, which had an infographic. This was in the African American Museum about whiteness, and this particular infographic had had a lot of interesting things to say, and they eventually, of course, took it down because of its incendiary nature. So you have that pulled up there?
I sure do.
Okay. So let's see. Where to even start with this thing? I mean, the only way to start is from the top, right? Got to start from the top. So, aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Wow, white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the way white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over the time and are now considered standard practice in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, probably because white people, that is European descent, make up 60 plus percent of the population. Anyways, we have all internalized some aspect of white culture, including people of color. So, like, I can't even talk about this without laughing. It's so absurd, but I don't know, man. What do you think about that statement alone upon itself?
So white. It's just it's kind of funny that they highlighted whiteness. Whiteness. It's such a strange concept to me because when I okay, let's just back up here and say the obvious. I feel like I'm kind of an expert in being white, um, considering I have been white my whole life. So looking at this person like describe it is really strange because I've been around the United States. I've met a lot of white people, and it's kind of hard for me to consider all these different people of culture, like even from like the difference between Southern culture, Southern white culture, and Northern white culture, are, miles apart. It's such a weird thing to think about it like this.
Right. Do where I grew up, I always call it redneck ghetto because it is the perfect blend of basically what you might consider Hicks and that ghetto culture. And I'm not talking about like black culture. I'm talking about, just ghetto culture in general, regardless of what your ethnicity is. So I don't know. Well, let's get into this first part. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. So that's whiteness to believe that the individual is the primary unit. I thought that idea came out of Greece, didn't it? Were
What?
those people really white? I mean,
So I mean, I don't understand. So the individual's the primary self-reliance. I can't think of really any culture off the top of my head where self-reliance isn't at the very least preferred. Like I get that you have like different kind of welfare systems, with your churches and stuff for people falling hard times or disabled or whatever. But I can't think of anywhere, that self reliance, like, hey, you at least need to like try to take care of yourself if you can.
Right, right. Well, yeah, and that's obviously a quality in almost every society. I mean, one of the things I think we lack in our society today is a lack of uh, um, rituals for grown men. Like women have this kind of natural ritual as they go through menstruation where they go into womanhood, but boys don't really have any of that. And in most ancient cultures, you would have something. And even developed ancient cultures like the Spartans, you would go through the Agoge, and you would be left out in the wilderness to fend for yourself. There were things that you had to go through. If you look at like various tribal cultures that still exist, they usually have some sort of rite or ritual with their boys, including like say Pacific Islanders have their tattooing, that kind of stuff. Um, so it's really interesting that that in our culture we do, or we used to at least, uh, prefer the individual and self-reliance. And over the course of, I don't know, the last 100 years, we've just, it's like, oh, no, let the government do everything. And men are just kind of, left behind. They're kind of left out of society unless they are the top earners, which is this article talks about too in a little bit.
Yeah, it's just with the way they're talking about this, whiteness is the dominant culture, and even for people of color. Well, if it's so dominant, why are you having to explain it with an infograph? Like,
Right.
you kind of think of water like, or I'm sorry, you kind of think of culture like a fish does water. Like it's just kind of all around you. Like you're a part of this every day. And if you can talk to black people and ask them about white people, and they'll have opinions, and they'll have little. I feel like the culture overlaps a lot, but you'll see a lot of black people that point out things about white culture. It's not like they don't understand it or aren't around it. That's kind of why I'm really suspicious about why they even posted this. And let me be frank here. Even though they've taken this down off this website, they put this up for a reason. This wasn't some accident. They're trying to make a statement. I'm not
It's
exactly.
called cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, no, it is for sure. And it is certainly a statement. It is from a government funded agency. The other interesting thing is that if you talk to most young black men specifically who aren't necessarily white acting, they want to be highly independent, autonomous, highly valued, rewarded. Uh, Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment, that kind of stuff. That is for certain something in almost every experience. And I grew up in an area with a pretty high density black population. Um, there was some self segregation as far as, generally speaking, as far as where people lived. That had nothing to do with any sort of laws. But I went to school all throughout school with a lot of black kids, and later in corrections, especially working over the years, working on the county level, you get to know people, you see them come in and out. I'm not saying they're all black people. In fact, it's a good mix in my area, but you you get this, relationship you build with these people, and you get to see what their attitudes are. Most of them, they think that um, they're independent, sovereign individuals. They don't want to rely on other people. Now, they don't necessarily believe in the system either, which is why they're criminals often. But um, and I don't mean all black people. I mean the ones, for instance, that I knew in corrections. But it's just absurd to me that this notion at all in any way is uh, a European alone thing. And then what is the opposite? I always say, if something states something specifically, what is the opposite of what it's stating? And the opposite of what it's stating is you have to be part of the collective. So that's that's not something that I really like. I don't like the hive mind. We are the Borg. You must assimilate.
It's strange too because I don't really know what they're trying to say with rugged individualism versus regular individualism. But like if you take a much less individualistic culture like the Chinese or something, and you talk to a Chinese person, it's not like they don't believe that you're somewhat responsible for your own outcomes and issues. Like it's one of the most studious cultures on the planet. They don't spend so much time studying, especially like the students that come to America. The Chinese students come here. Like, they spend so much time studying. I actually tutored some, or not tutored, but mentored some Chinese students when I was in college, and I mean, all they did was study, and they were very adamant on like I have to make the best grades. So it's not, they have a certain individualistic aspect too. It's I feel like this is kind of a universal thing that we believe in, pretty much throughout the world. Like, I can't think of anything where they're, completely not individualistic or whatever.
Well, any highly developed society, I would say so. In fact, the lack of individuality, I would say it becomes that slave mentality and goes back to you know Nietzsche's master versus slave morality, that kind of stuff. Of course, I believe any system that you're plugged into, any addiction you might have, anything that you're not in control of, you're essentially a slave to. That's a deeper philosophical point, but that's certainly very much why probably I'm very very liberty oriented. But let's jump down here to the family structure. It says the nuclear family, father, mother, 2.3 children. This is the ideal social unit. Now, the first thing I thought when seeing this is like, I'm like, really? So are you saying that if you're non-white, that you should be from a broken family? like, that's only white culture to have a family that's together? Like, what is this? Husband is the breadwinner, head of household, wife, the housemaker, and subordinate to the husband. Children have own rooms and be independent. Now, that has more to do with poverty than anything. And in most of human society, children didn't have their own rooms, um, nor did the husband or wife. But as far as like being the breadwinner or the housewife, the homemaker, like that is a very traditional. I guarantee you, I could take any family from Asia, say Korea, Japan, China, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, they that would be a normal cultural thing for them. I could take anyone practically from the Middle East, let's say India or from Muslim cultures, and that would be the norm for them. Anyone in South America, generally, unless they had to work because they were extremely poor, that would be the norm for them. It's like these people that write this stuff have never traveled the world, never been anywhere, never met any other person outside of what they consider white culture. And it, I don't know, it's just so completely obtuse and absurd to me. And honestly, when I do talk to people who think this way, generally they are cloistered, they aren't very intelligent. And interestingly, though, they're often elitist. So, you know,
Yeah, this when they're talking about the nuclear family, I could kind of see maybe, because I'm actually a pretty big proponent of the extended family. I think it has a lot of benefits, and I think it is something that we've kind of lost due to different aspects of culture that maybe we can get into later. But
right.
so I could see that, but I don't feel like that's what they're trying to highlight here. I don't, when they say, "Oh, the nuclear family, father, mother," like, who really believes that single parent households are good? Like, we recognize, I guess, that sometimes we live in a kind of a shitty society, and a lot of people can't get along, and they have children out of wedlock, and all kinds of other issues. So I could see like understanding that it's going to happen, but I don't think anyone could really believes that that's ideal or good, or if you can't have the father and mother, it's better than not having the father and mother together.
Right. I think the norm of society thinks that having both a father and mother is ideal. I think that the differentiation here is that there is a group of people that are trying to excuse their poor moral behavior, and they can't confront. the reality that you have a lot of women. It's like the women empowerment, the feminism. You have a lot of women out there that are essentially saying, "I don't need no man." What was the Gloria? I think Gloria Steinem said, what is it? Man is to a woman like a fish to a bike or whatever.
Mm.
Or woman is to a man. Yeah. Anyways, regardless of who said it or if I got the quote exactly right, it's just it's silliness. Like it is the inherent unit of society. And in fact, what happens is if men don't pair off with women, they get um basically dejected from society and they get angry most often. Not all men, of course, there's always exceptions on the margins. But this idea that it is not the norm to pair bond is silly. And we know in societies where essentially there's polygamy and only the top males get all the women, we know the women actually tend to do all right. They might be, I mean, there might be some more oppression towards women, but the men get extremely violent, extremely angry. This is well studied within the social science. So I can't see how propping up single motherhood is good unless you want to replace, you know, the family with the state, which I would say that's what this is.
I mean, definitely to a certain extent, and a lot of these people that advocate for this sort of thing has made that pretty clear in the past. Your children don't belong to you. They need. And I could, like I said before, like I could kind of see like the idea of, children are raised best in the village, or children are raised best in the extended family, or in the community. I get that to a certain extent, but these guys are talking about raising your children through bureaucracy, and like, I mean, really,
Right.
public school is raising children right now. And I think you could argue
Horribly
that,
too.
yeah, yeah,
Horribly.
I think we could all say that it's been pretty terrible for the most part. They've done a pretty bad job at it, but that's kind of what we've built in our culture, because we've done this. We've really broken away from so many traditional roles where normally, you'd have someone at home all the time raising your kids, or perhaps even homeschooling or whatever, or your schooling would be the neighbor's parents. But we don't have. It's something we've lost, and that's another thing about this that I think is so strange is that culture, be it white culture or whatever, has changed so much in the last 80 to 100 years that this is almost meaningless. Because in a lot of these points, I feel like a lot of us would rather not have it that way.
Well, look, I mean, we've literally abdicated our responsibility to the state in so many things. And the interesting thing was with the American experiment is that we were meant not to do such a thing. We were meant to be strong, independent people. Um, I just did a video today. Like I just put it up before we went live on my other channel, all minus one, plug number one. Anyways, I put it up today about Ben Franklin's quote about deserving those who want to give away essential liberty for temporary safety deserve neither. And I was explaining that in the actual depths of what he said, because it's often misused and misquoted, but a lot of people that try to even destroy what he was saying by saying, well, no, it doesn't mean that you can't, that the state can't do certain things. It's like, of course not, because he was talking about protecting the frontier at the time during the French and Indian War, um, where the Indian tribes were there was an attack at Penn's Creek, which is up near State College, PA. So my whole point to all that was is that he was trying to get money for these people to have arms, but he wasn't trying to impose some sort of governmental thing on these people either. And so that quote was coming up a lot in the past because of things like NAS surveillance and the Patriot Act, those kind of things. And that's not really how he meant it. At the same time, the argument was that the Penns, who owned Pennsylvania, did not want to allocate money to help these people out on the frontier. So it was a matter of the state should be helping out its people secure their own liberty, essentially. And that's not what we have now. We have a state that wants to, like, in simple terms, make you its slave. It wants you to be on the doll. It thinks it can tell you everything, how to act and what to do, and it's just crazy, crazy social engineering.
Well, that's kind of the the goal of progressivism, right? Is that the past was bad, and everything we did in the past was inferior or bad or evil or whatever, and we have to come up with a system that progresses us to something better, as though the way humans did things forever, you know, wasn't good enough. Humans are pretty. If you drop me off in the middle of the wilderness right now, I probably wouldn't survive. I think most people wouldn't. So the fact that our ancestors were like able to like survive in the harsh wilderness leads me to believe they were not complete dumbasses and actually kind of had some good ideas about some things.
Right, and that letter that that Franklin wrote from the General Assembly to the governor, um, he actually talked about that these people, these families are living on farms like, 2 and 3 miles apart. And so they're taking care of themselves completely, but there's not enough aid there that if they're attacked by, squad of marauders, that they're going to be able to hold themselves out. And that's it's a really important idea. I also did want to mention off topic. We talked about Mulbug last week, and I'm not sold on all of his ideas per se, but it was funny to see that Sargon did a cast about him. So he must have watched our stream,
You know, we're
got
we're
the idea. I don't know.
we're pretty big influencers these days. Got a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
got
We everybody's listening right now. We're pretty influential. I know. I don't know what we're gonna do with all this fame. You know.
yeah.
Well, let's move on to emphasis on the scientific method. So obviously, this is for sure postmodernist nonsense. And it's the objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, and quantitative emphasis. That's like basically saying, I mean, it's like basically saying, well, yeah, if you use logic, if you're smart, if you take your time to figure things out and just don't, react emotionally, then you're white. And again, like everything, I haven't brought it up yet, but pretty much everything in this, Tim Pool mentioned this, and it's certainly true, but everything in this is, to me, a supremacist. And I don't mean towards white people. I mean that they're saying that white people are somehow superior to people who aren't white. I mean, because again, if you invert what that says right there, you're essentially saying that people who aren't white, or who at least don't exhibit white culture, don't do these things, right? They can't do these things. That soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah, this is a really strange one, because being like I said, like we've talked about before, I'm more of a traditionalist and kind of got a pretty rosy picture of how I view human society in the past, and human society in the before was not objective. It's another one of those things about how cultures change so much. Not that long ago, if you ask, why is the sky blue and why is the grass green? It's just that's how God made it. And stop asking questions. Um, and then we've kind of gotten more into this idea of we need to be objective. We have linear thinking. We need to measure
Well,
things.
let's go down that rabbit hole because I don't agree with you.
Okay.
Let's go down that rabbit hole real quick because what I would say is that the church, which was a institution, right? It was a political organization. So the Catholic Church decided that it wanted to exert its control and authority over people, and therefore it allowed people to remain illiterate. It taught only in Latin, which is not the language the Bible was written in, and would not allow people to even read the Bible. Would burn them at the stake for doing so. It kept science out, and before that, in my beliefs, at least my Christian beliefs that I've developed over many years, go back to the first century and the first century metaphysics. When we talk about Christ being the logos, what we're saying is he is not only the word, he's the very reason, the very logic, it's where we get the word logic from, of all existence and all of truth. And that Christ being the logos was so important in the day that it meant that you had to come to a rational relationship with God. And there were, if you read the first century Christians, there weren't a lot that wrote. Most of them were in the second and third century, as far as the early church, and some of the fourth. And you could see where it changes by the fourth century because Greek philosophy started to get involved, and so you had a lot of Gnostic influence. You had a lot of uh, Neoplatonicism. You had a lot of things. Origen, who I think was a very godly man, he started to talk about the Bible as if it were allegory, and those ideas were kind of new at the time. Before that, there were people like was it Clement of Alexandria was a Christian scholar who was originally a philosopher, and he sold all of his books and lived a life of poverty and taught in the church and was very influential. And he came to Christianity because he saw the the truth of the logos, and that it was the truth of the universe. And that was a rational decision of his. Now, I do think that there's a balance where you have a rational decision, you must make a rational decision, and then you have an emotional appeal. I'm actually not a fan of a lot of the modern church that it's all based on emotions, such as like in the charismatic movement. And I'm not against people in the charismatic movement either, but I think that they're missing the other half of it. Um, but my whole point is that reason went away, objectivity went away with the church essentially riding the state. And before that, Western society, Western culture, other than the tribes and the Germanic tribes or whatever, they were very objective, reasonable, rational people. So much so that to some degree they were cold hearted. They didn't really believe, the Romans didn't believe in compassion like we do. So, anyways.
No, no, no. Yeah, no. I get exactly what you're saying. I don't disagree with that. My thing is, this emphasis on the scientific method. Science, especially the scientific method, we're talking about is it's not that old. It's what 500 years old or something. Um, and if you ever listen to, there's a guy named Hunter Motts. He's been on Joe Rogan a couple of times, but he has this podcast called Mixed Mental Arts, and it kind of goes into some stuff you're talking about with emotion versus rationality. But one of the things he says is that we kind of get this idea that the scientific method was invented 500 years ago, and before that everyone was stupid. And I know you're not saying that. I'm not trying to
Right,
say you're
right.
saying that, but I'm kind of to the point to where I'm becoming, I guess, anti-science. I don't really know how to say it other than that. Where it's just like, I don't care as much about scientific methods and things are what they are. Like I don't feel the need to explain everything. I don't feel the need to justify my entire outlook on life based on objective reasoning so much as I just do like it's kind of taking everything in and understanding as it comes to me, so to speak. It doesn't need to be empirical, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that's it depends on I guess where you stand, or what you're looking for. Like for me, for instance, like Jordan Peterson was a good good way for me, watching his stuff and reading his books was a good way for me to materialize and articulate what I already knew and believed, and actually had already understood on some scientific levels, through things that I've encountered and read over the years. At the same time, I think the scientific method is not used in science very often anymore. You can read, and here's, hear me out on this, is that scientists are human beings. And so they're flawed. So there's always going to be flaws within the method. The studies often, and I used to read a lot of studies regularly, are not well designed. And then the conclusions they bring from them are not anything that the data actually says. And they want to shoehorn their beliefs, their ideology into the data. This is why there's still debate in the social science if gender is biological. And I can tell you it is. It's absolutely biological. It has to be. And the reason why it has to be is because we have different hormones, we have different brains, we have different body structures. And when we study personalities across cultures, we see different behaviors. But feminists want to break down gender into, well, no, it's, their concept is no, boys don't have to wear blue and girls don't have to wear pink. And it's like, it's not about boys wearing blue and girls wearing pink. It's about normative behaviors of the species and the differentiation between sexes. And the sexes have gendered behavior. But that's all postmodernist nonsense where they want to break it down. So and that's something that we're seeing more and more and more. I didn't, man, I completely forgot about it. But apparently Dawkins was talking about Christianity the other week, and I forgot to get around to watching a video. Um, and now he's starting to be, oh, Christianity has its merits. And it's like this from the guy whoever forever was like, oh yeah, Christianity, oh yeah, religion's horrible, oh yeah, you're just stupid, blah 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 blah. It's like, yeah, well, now that the postmodernists are coming after Dawkins and rationality and logic, what does he do? Oh, well, there actually is some merits in traditional values. Come on.
Yeah, Moldbug actually wrote another essay called "How Dawkins Got Pwned," and it kind of talks about all that. Yeah, what you're talking about with kind of the way I see it, when it comes to this,
Go get me a beer.
go ahead. When it comes to talking about science or our cultural understanding of science, that's kind of like like I said before, we kind of get in this mindset that we cannot understand anything without scientific empiricism, and it's kind of brought us to this stage. And I agree with what you're saying that a lot of science, the scientific method, isn't really being used in science anymore, especially in social science. Um,
Right.
but we got this point like, oh, we're asking questions like, how do we know that there's a difference between men and women? Well, the traditionalists had an answer. The answer was because we've always known that. It's not something we had to debate. In 1450, it's something we
What's the
debate.
kid say? What's the kid saying? Kindergarten cop. Boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. I mean, it like seriously, we can
Yeah.
tell. I've had these arguments with women, with my wife earlier on when we were dating, talking to her, and she's like, "Well, women are just as strong in their legs and their hips." And I'm like, "Potentially, but not necessarily." And that's the thing. Do you want to even understand that women actually cannot biomechanically move as functionally as men in the lower body because the hips are wider and the knees come down? I'm going to do it invertedly, but the knees come in an angle, whereas men are more straight on, which transfers um, the distribution of the muscles and the energy transfers better in two straight pillars than when you have this bowing at the legs inward and then down. So women are more prone to certain injuries in the hips and knees. Actually,
Yeah.
now men are more prone because we're stupid and we beat each other up. But
Yeah. No, no, I think it's like you're right, and I think that's the difference between mine and your perspectives. Is you've got a more modernist perspective, and for me, I look at it as if you went back to like 1300 and asked someone what's the difference between men and women, they're going to be like, well, the ones that have the babies aren't the ones we're going to send out to spear the buffalo. like it's that simple. It doesn't need to be
Right.
that complicated. But anyway, we're kind of got off on a tangent.
Well, I mean, tangents are cool, man. I mean, we got plenty of time, so we will move on. Let's get down here to the history. It says based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States, heavily focuses on the British Empire, the primacy of Western, Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition. Well, I wonder why that is. Is it not because America was from primarily founded until the 1970s from immigrants? Was it not primarily, maybe people don't know this, but very early on, we accepted a lot of German immigrants, and the people in the government debated whether we should or not. And the reason why is because they weren't sure if these German immigrants were going to change the culture because Germany has a different culture. If you're from Deutschland, you're going to think differently. In fact, so much so that Germans say things like "we Germans," whereas the British, people of English ancestry or Scottish, Welsh, or Irish, don't think like that. They're much more individualistic. And then the primacy of the West, well, yeah, the West controlled the world. There was no empire as strong as any empire from the West. They started off in the East, right? We could talk about like the Egyptians before that, but essentially, as far as the biggest empires in the world, you had the Babylonians, and then the Medo Persians came in, and then the Greeks came up. Now they went to the eastward, but mostly they got contained back into the area that Greece is now in, and Asia Minor, and then spread northward and outward. And then the Roman Empire, the same thing. And then through that, the European tradition, eventually, when it got to colonializing, um, went all throughout the world. There was no other imperial culture that did that. And I'm not a fan of empire myself, and it has nothing to do with colonialism. I think colonialism had some potential good, even though it was in its own way somewhat cruel. I mean, but it did advance all of human society more quickly. Um, and then the whole Judeo-Christian thing. Well, yeah, that those beliefs, whether they were held to from a traditional perspective of what the Bible actually teaches or not, and again, I would say that was because of the church's influence, the church's power. Of course, it was different in the East. The Eastern Orthodox tradition is way different than the Roman Catholic tradition, and I'm not actually against Catholics themselves, but I do not believe the Roman Catholic Church is a legitimate organization as far as papal primacy and all that stuff. But that's another tangent. Um, but that Judeo Christian value is very important because it taught the sanctity of the individual and the soul, and whether people always lived up to that or not is another issue, because hardly throughout history and even now with friends and family, will you ever know somebody who is 100% holding up to their principles, and that's because we're all flawed. But I don't know, Tank, you got anything on that, man?
Um, no, I mean, yeah, the primacy of Western, Greek, Roman, Judeo-Christian tradition. I mean, it is what it is. It's really weird that they're putting this in as a, this is a culture of whiteness. Like it's what it's ultimately the legacy that defined the United States. So it's all of us. It's not like your average African American person or whatever is out here not following along with the Judeo-Christian tradition. They very much are. It's and you could even argue. I think it has been argued that black people actually tend to be more religious, in Christian and Protestant specifically. So it's one of those things.
Oh yeah,
I just
for
don't really
sure, for sure.
I don't really get what they're getting at here with this being like a bullet point for whiteness specifically. It's
Yeah,
really
well,
strange.
regardless of who they vote for, a lot of black communities are actually very conservative, at least with
Mhm.
themselves. You know, so
No,
yeah, I mean, I would
and it's really
go ahead.
strange. It's really strange too because when you're talking about Christian culture in itself, there's a huge difference between the Eastern Orthodox Church culture wise and the AME Zion or Southern Baptist Church culture wise. It's really you're treading some weird water when you're trying to put those two things together, it under one umbrella.
Well, and that is also, I believe, the spirit though of what Christianity is. If you know anything about the history of Christianity and how it came about, you would see that all the churches originally were autonomous within cities. Now they might confer with other churches, and there were the apostles who created those churches who might be over them per se. But the first ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea, that everyone seems to believe created the Bible, which is complete utter nonsense. Um, that was the first time that the state got involved with the church, and Constantine called that count or had that council called essentially to decide on the divinity of Jesus Christ, and that's all it really was about. Now, before that, the churches believed in whatever they believed on their own. That didn't happen until I believe the 5th century. So there was 400 years of Christianity before that of autonomy. And I think that is, if you go back to the Old Testament, the way the Israelites were originally set up in their kingdom were meant to be. Each tribe was supposed to be autonomous. And y- so when people talk about why are Christians divided? Why is there such a schism? Why is there this and that? Well, to me, in my mind, it's because God wants us to have a relationship with Him on an individual basis. I don't think it's any more complicated than that, really. Now it doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want either. I mean, there are rules, right? There are things that God requires of us or asks of us. But the um the point is that he doesn't want a bunch of walking zombies. And if he did, then there wouldn't be so many different people within in the biblical scriptures with different personalities.
Yeah, that's yeah, like we're talking about. There's a lot of stuff going on here in terms of how they're trying to cram this into being a white thing when there's Christians all over the world. I mean, there's Korean Baptist Church. Like this is a this is a worldwide.
What about the Coptic Ethiopian Church, one of the oldest churches still in existence today?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but yeah, the Korean Baptists, they're pretty big. Uh, there's some in my area, yeah, for sure.
But you wouldn't look. I mean, even though they're Baptist, you wouldn't go to a Korean Baptist person and say, "Oh, you're part of white culture." Like you're not. They're not part of white culture, and the fact that they're Korean Baptist doesn't make them an extension of whiteness. I don't think.
Well, the interesting thing with the Baptists too is they're not fully organized. You can be part of the Southern Baptist network, but uh, man, anyways, excuse me. You can be part of the Southern Baptist network, and not necessarily they don't necessarily have any particular belief or canon per se. So you get some that are like Calvinist, and you get some, and I hate using the word Arminian, because it's not Arminianism. Really we're talking about Augustinianism versus traditional Christianity, but that's a whole nother tangent we can get into another time. Um, as far as yeah, it has nothing to do with any sort of ethnicity, you know,
Right. This next point they get.
religion of some sort. But go ahead.
Yeah, this next point they get into about the Protestant work ethic, I think this is probably one of the better points they make. I kind of feel like this is kind of true because even if you're not Protestant in America, a lot of the culture is Protestant. You're not going to go into the Lifeway Christian bookstore and find defenses of the papacy or whatever. Um, it kind of is what it is. But again, it's not a white thing. But I don't know. What do you think about the Protestant work ethic?
Well, just real quick on that defenses of the papacy. There's a lot of Protestants that have been calling over the last, I don't know, 20 or 30 years to return to the Catholic Church. So, which is absurd because I mean, I don't know. I hold the belief that the Catholic Church is or at least the papacy itself is the harlot that rides the beast in the book of Revelations, but that's a whole nother tangent. And that is also what the a lot of the reformers thought. Isaac Newton thought that, and I'm pretty sure that dude's a lot smarter than I am. Um, inventing calculus and physics and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure he understood his scriptures rather well. In any case, this work ethic, hard work is the key to success. Work before play. If you don't meet your goals, you don't work hard enough. Well, I don't know about not meeting your goals. There's a certain amount of talent involved. Hard work is the key to success. That's actually largely true. Um, from what I understand, in the social sciences and good social sciences, that is, the two biggest factors are how hard you work, how industrious you are, and your IQ. Now, your IQ becomes is second. You can be very successful and not have a very high IQ. Um, but the higher your IQ is, the more quickly you'll recover from mistakes or whatever. Uh, but not everyone with a high IQ either has a strong work ethic. So I I myself, I'm not a hyper digilant worker. I mean, I sort of am when I'm in certain jobs and certain aspects, but I kind of I kind of fall into this more like artistic side of things. You know, I grew up drawing all my life and was in like chorus and theater and that kind of stuff. When I was younger, I wanted to make movies, wanted to be a movie director, you know. And I've just pursued different things in life, and now like part of my artistic expression is just cooking, you know, and so there's still that. Um, but the point is that artists tend to struggle with this kind of thing a lot. Other people, though, like someone like I think Donald Trump, for instance, is probably working a lot. And most of the people that are super rich, that are super powerful, are working a lot. Uh, there's a factor of luck in there too. Like you can work a lot and get nowhere, but it's hard to pin why you're not getting anywhere. Is it because you're busting your butt and no one appreciates what you're doing? Is it because you're within a corrupt system with bad leadership? Is it because you're actually incompetent, but you're too incompetent or too dumb to realize it? The Dunning Kruger effect, if you would. Um, is it a matter of are you unwilling to actually go the extra mile and step out and do something that breaks you out of where you're at? So there's the risk aversion thing there too, because entrepreneurs are not risk adverse. They take risks. And then at the same time, a lot of times they're not as organized, so they need people. So it's a matter of personalities and all this other stuff. I don't think that that's just a Christian thing, though. Um, so
Oh no, yeah,
there's that.
yeah, for sure. Like there's many industrious societies, and I'd even argue there's cultures definitely outside of white culture that are a lot more, will pin the blame of your failure or lack of success, I should say, on the individual rather than like there's no one I could think of that if I was like, oh, such and such started a business or whatever and they failed, they would necessarily blame that. It's things are hard. It's we I think we pretty much everyone in America understands that there's 1,000 reasons why you'll fail, and it's not necessarily lack of hard work. Um, so it's just kind of a like you just kind of put it in like a more down to earth perspective. I do jujitsu and have a coach that he's a wrestler. He'll tell you right quick. He's like, look, um, you can work really hard at doing the wrong thing and it's going to cause you to fail, as opposed to taking advantage of what's given
Oh,
to you.
Tank, you're coming in all like weird on me here.
Okay, let's see here. I think we got. I'm not getting dropped frames. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello.
Let's say you there, man, because you're kind of cutting in and out a
Yeah.
little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, last week when I was just going to say last week when we did the stream, I said that a couple times, and actually during the stream, you were perfectly fine. So,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I
it's
think
just
I think you're cutting out a little bit.
it's
I'm.
whatever. But I got you were saying you're talking about jujitsu.
Yeah. So like my coach will tell you that um, you can work very hard at doing the wrong thing and it'll make you fail, as opposed to kind of taking advantage of what's ever given to you and not necessarily having to work as hard to be successful. So it's there's a work smarter, not harder thing involved in this
I don't
culture.
have you. Let me Right, efficiency real quick. Our little meetup here and come back in and see if that helps. Okay,
Okay.
got me.
Yeah.
All right, you there?
I am here. We are back.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was weird. Go ahead and bring us back up, man.
We're
Like,
good. Yeah, we're still streaming.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm watching the stream. Obviously, it's a little bit behind, but um, yeah, you're talking about your jujitsu coach. I'm sure that went on the stream. I kind of get what you're saying. Work smarter, not harder. That
Yeah.
is a big thing about all martial arts. Any good martial arts always going to teach you to reserve your energy and those kind of things. I studied Russian martial arts for years, and that was a big part of what they teach. Is I always call it like lazy fighting. It's like being the most efficient you could be. So, but let's continue with this text so we can keep moving along for the sake of time, which I'm sure we'll get through this because we're getting down to the bottom. Um, Christianity is the norm. Uh, anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation from a single God concept. That's just absurd to me. Like originally in the founding of the United States, yes, there was that common ideal of God and some sort of Christian form, but oh, excuse me. I do know that there are some Christians that are very adamant against other religions. Again, I take a early church, first, second, third century viewpoint where they believed there was no compulsion of other religions and you respected everyone else's right to religion. Whether I think that the God that I worship, the God of the universe, the architect of the universe, is the one and only God, and you think that your God is, that makes no difference. I still respect your belief. In fact, I had a conversation with uh, a Muslim kid that I kind of made friends with over Discord a while back, and he was like trying to convert me, and I'm like, dude, I'm not convertible. And he just kept sending me stuff, and I'm like, well, have you? He's like, he does what Muslims are taught to do, and they're actually taught very well, to discredit Christianity and stuff. And I'm like, you're saying stuff to me, man. Like I've done the research on both ends of this, and I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't buy the Muslim faith. It was founded in warfare, as far as I'm concerned. Christianity was founded in peace. Um, but the writings, the Islamic writings, the earliest that we know of them were something like 200 years after Muhammad lived, if he ever did live. And again, I'm not trying to crap on Muslims out there. If you're Muslim and whatever, this is just my thoughts. But there's also people say that about the biblical text, but that's just not true as far as the New Testament. It is easily written within 30 to 50 years after Christ died, the beginnings of it. And not only that, but we can reconstruct the entire New Testament scriptures based on the writings of the first few century Christians because they quoted it so heavily. We have thousands and thousands of texts from antiquity. It was translated into hundreds of languages immediately. Most people don't know this stuff though, so they go along with stupid narratives about oh yeah, the Bible was taken and Jesus was just the old zeitgeist thing. Jesus was just taken I forget astrotheology is what that's called. I'm sorry. Jesus is just taken from these other pagan religions and this and that, blah 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 blah. And it's like no, that there's actually no there's a lot of occult writings about that, but there's no real scholarship on that. And it was addressed in the second century by Justin Martyr, the first Christian apologist. And Justin Martyr is called Justin Martyr, by the way, because he was martyred. And martyred basically just means witness. So, like I said, I, I just don't see this. I think that most people people in the United States respect other religions. They may not agree with them, but the 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 Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's Satanism, why isn't that banned? You
Yeah.
know, why isn't being a Muslim banned? You know,
No, yeah, you're absolutely
go ahead,
right.
man.
No, you're absolutely right about that. You know, I guess they want to call it white culture. What they're talking about here has been pretty. It's been pretty. I guess the word is tolerant of other concepts. Especially in America. Um, we there's a past of people not getting along, but that's everywhere. That's not unique to anything that we're talking about here.
Right. It's not unique to race or ethnicity either. So, you still there, man?
Yeah, I'm. You're getting locked up on the camera here a little bit. I'm trying to work together here.
What's up?
Okay, we're good. Um, so I guess we're going down here to we went past religion, status, power, and authority. Wealth equals worth. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, property. What do you think about that?
Well, wealth equals worth. I don't think most people agree with that. I think some people who are highly motivated to work 20-hour days, they agree with that. Like why else would would do such a thing? Um I think I think it depends on what kind of people you're talking about and what their goals are. For me, I'd rather have a high quality of life and that rather than having so much wealth to spend on things. So I'd rather have time to spend with my daughter or my wife, even though, right now I'm working very hard and I've worked hard in the past, but I've also seen where I've worked 16-hour days repeatedly. It's not fun. You don't have any social life and it kind of destroys your soul. And it says your job is who you are. Well, some people think that way, but it's like the concept of, are you working to live or are you living to work? And it's a mindset. Do you have a job just so you can get by and get the things that you need, or at least not have to worry about your bills? Or are you the kind of person that just thrives at work? You want to work all the time. Well, those people exist, but they're not, I don't think they're the norm. And I think social psychology will tell us this if we look at it. Because most of those people are who are the hyper wealthy and the most successful, but they're not the norm. They're few and far between, and people don't recognize that. And that's why they get into this like classism stuff. That's kind of silly to me. Respect for authority. Well, again, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. Does this mean that people who aren't white or don't have white culture don't respect authority? Is this why like, are you saying, is this saying that like blacks or other minorities cannot possibly respect authority? Like, I don't get this. I don't even get that whole idea. Heavy value on ownership, goods, space, property. I think that often is a materialistic thing that people get because they don't have a developed spiritual life. They don't have good religious morals, and they haven't developed their soul. And I've been caught in this trap before, where not that I'm so much materialistic, but I buy clothes or that I didn't necessarily need, or I spend money on this gadget or that. I think if you look at people who are hoarders, what are they doing? They're just buying junk to fill up their homes they don't even use, and they live in kind of gross conditions. And it's this can I gather stuff? Can I get all this material in order to heal some hole within their soul? You know, so I don't know. What do you got, man?
Yeah, consumerism is a pretty interesting concept, and it's something I've been looking into a lot recently. Um, and it's something I'm very critical of, of modern society over um, heavy value on ownership, goods, space, property. You know, it's kind of hard to understand what they're talking about here because pretty much everyone in the history of the world, have viewed owning, some amount of property, be it like farming land or whatever, as a something, it's wealth you can pass on, and it's been cherished, in practically every culture. Now, if it was talking about super individual ownership, maybe I could see where they're coming from, but this just seems to be, you know, a general bullet point applies to everyone. And the thing about it, talking about consumerism and whatnot is, you know, white people are not any more consumerist than other American cultures. If you could listen to practically any rap song, in the last 30 years, and you'll see a heavy dose of consumerism in that as well. So I just don't really understand what they're talking about here. It seems kind of strange.
Well, yeah, yeah, I, I wanted to get me so right. Well, I kind of wanted to bring that up myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Tank, you there? Thumbs
Yes,
up, thumbs
yes,
down.
I am here. You're kind of breaking out a little
All right,
bit.
guys.
Are you there?
So,
Si yo fuera joven, si yo fuera un dandy, si yo no tuviera mis 40 abriles, si mi cabellera no estuviera blanca, tu amor conquistada, así me dijiste.
all right, sorry, man. You kept getting funky on me, and I had to drop out there. So you got me now.
Yeah, I got you. You keep. I don't. Your video keeps dropping.
I think it's my. I think on this it might have been my internet. I just switched to my main internet because I have an extender that sometimes gets funky. I don't know if that's was it or not, but if you're ready to go, I am. I'm gonna get back to that point you were talking about.
I don't have any video for you right now.
Oh, you don't have video? Hold on.
Yeah,
How about now?
I still do not have video.
Let me try and boot up this meets again. Now it is what it is. Got video now?
No video.
Well, if we have audio, we can just go with that.
Okay, yeah, I've got audio. We can keep going. That's fine.
All right. So just tell me when.
You're good. Yeah, you're good. We're streaming.
All right, guys. Sorry, our tech issues. It happens. But um maybe he'll get video back on me. Doesn't really matter unless you're trying to look at my pretty face or something. Uh, we were talking about materialism and consumerism, and it depends on what you think of materialism. And uh, I consider materialism to be several different things. One is obviously that we live in a material world, but then two, like, are we consuming? And so I like to use the term consumerism. And consumerism is really high. And again, I don't want to say black culture, but in ghetto culture. Like, think about guys that deal drugs, and I've known many of them in my life. In the county I used to work in, I always tell everyone I'm like, I know all the criminals in the county. And there's several thousand people that are criminals because of my job. And they they're getting tons and tons of money all the time. They have what they call, their gangster rolls. They have a big old fat wad, and they're literally be thousands of dollars there. And what do they spend them on? Well, they spend them on other drugs. They spend them on girls, food, shoes, their car. But they never spend them or invest them for anything for their future. They're not thinking about that. So certainly whiteness or white culture isn't the only culture that spends money. But I mean, it's the last thing I'm going to say about that. You ready to move on, man?
Yeah, we can keep going.
All right. So we're almost there. We're almost at the bottom. So planning for the future. Well, that's just what I said, right? Delayed gratification progression is always best. Tomorrow will be better. Time follows rigid time schedules. This was the big one Tim Pool talked about, because he was like,
Uh,
yeah, he was like, are you saying that my Korean heritage didn't have time schedules? Obviously everyone knows about the Mayan calendar, the old 2012 thing, which some say was off, and it might have been 2020. But I've also heard 2022. But in any case, the whole Mayan calendar thing, obviously ancient people kept schedules. Sundials. Look, man, people have always kept schedules. At least uh, if you're an agrarian culture or even a hunter-gatherer culture knows, based on the stars, based on the movement of the sun, you have a schedule. Like, it's just stupid. And again, I always say, like, this is like, what are you saying? Like, other minorities, or sorry, other groups. Look, by the way, people, white people are not a minority or a majority. Now, in the United States, they are a majority, but the world is divided up as far as what's considered the major races. I don't really believe in race, anyways, because ethnicities are a far more important metric, in my opinion. But I get the idea of racial classifications, but it just gets far too complicated. And historically, the way people migrated and interbred and whatever else, it's stupid to me. It really is, and mostly has to do with where you live in the world and how much sun you got, and what genes proliferated over time. Um, but anyways, the the um, the idea that people didn't keep time is just silly. And what are you saying? Are you saying that certain ethnic groups just can't be on time? Like, I'll give you one that I know is a very cultural thing: is Brazilians. If you go to Brazil and you expect anyone to be on time, it's probably not going to happen. Are all Brazilians the same ethnic group? You know, I can tell you they're not. I used to date a Brazilian girl. Like, they're very they're a very, very mixed culture. And as far as ethnicity goes, they start things whenever they decide to start them. Are you saying, as far as American goes, as far as American, European, or whiteness, that black people can't be on time, Hispanics can't be on time? Which, by the way, Hispanics is a subset of white. It's a ethnic group, not a race. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about that, other than it's just stupid.
yeah, that's a very strange kind of point there. Followed a rigid time schedule. Well, a lot of people do, especially anyone who comes from agriculture, like since we've been growing things, we've understood that time
Right.
matters and is important. So I don't really think that's a white thing. But we can keep going
Well,
here.
yeah. Well, don't you think like if you were even still in a hunter gatherer society, you would know where the sun would be at, and you wouldn't want to be stuck out in the bush at dark, or you would have to make camp soon as the sun was going down. It's time is time. It's not like human beings aren't aware of it. In fact, I would even say the fact one of the reasons that we are different than the rest of the animal kingdom is that we are aware of it.
Right.
You know. All right. Aesthetics based on European culture. Steak and potatoes, bland is best. You know, I know this is absurd. I had steak and potatoes last night, but they certainly weren't bland. And it it's so ridiculous. Like, I love my favorite foods are like Mediterranean, Mexican, Asian foods like Thai I'm a huge fan of like sashimi, which you could say sashimi is actually bland. Um, like this is just stupid. It's just stupid. I'm not gonna say anything more about it.
Yeah.
Women's
Where?
beauty based on blonde and thin, Barbie. Well, I'm not a big fan of blondes. I mean, I've been attracted to blondes in my life. I've dated some blondes, that kind of stuff. But I mean, I actually like Middle Eastern and uh, Hispanic girls. I like girls with darker skin and big brown eyes and dark silky hair. Um, I don't know what that is, why, but I do. Uh, Man's attractiveness based on economic status, power, and intellect. No, that's not men are attractive to women because they are seen as providers, period. So if you're funny, you're smart, if you're well to do, if a woman sees that you have drive, you will be successful with women. Now, if you're attractive, if you're actually physically attractive, yeah, you might do a little bit better. But we all know guys who are ugly as sin with beautiful women, so it's not like that doesn't happen. It's not like women don't like looks either. They do, but men and women look for different things. So what you got on that, Tank?
You know, I just keep thinking like men's attractiveness based on economic status, power, and intellect. That's everywhere. If anyone was attracted to incels, then incels wouldn't be a problem. So,
Right.
so it's just one of
Right. And these are the same people that diss on incels,
those.
you know? Yeah, it blows my mind. Blows my mind. Let's keep moving. Holidays based on Christian religion. Well, why wouldn't they? Since the majority of the country was founded in Christianity. Based on white histories, male leaders. Well, what's MLK Day?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, before that, like, yeah, there was some influential black uh, people in history, but a lot of that was also destroyed once the Wilson administration came in, which most people aren't aware of. And Wilson was he was a progressive, by the way, just in case nobody knew. Justice based on English common law. Well, yeah, English common law is thousands of years old based on Roman law of sorts, protection of property and entitlements. This is just commie code right here. Anytime they start talking about this stuff, I don't have a right to my stuff. Okay. Let me come to your house with a gun. We'll see how you like that. And just take your stuff. Just give it to me, right? Intent counts. When does intent not count? Like, even if you do something illegal or wrong, you may get in trouble, but leniency is always given because of intent. If you kill somebody, there are degrees of murder, right? Manslaughter is when you accidentally kill somebody. When it's the next level, what is it? Second degree murder. Well, it depends on the state, right? It's basic though, is what I'm talking about. Second degree murder is like you killed them, you knew they would die. Whereas manslaughter, you didn't know that you were going to cause the death. First degree, you plotted it out, you thought about it, and then you went and murdered them. That intent is important. And the reason why is because you had time to not only think it through, but you you made the steps, and at no point did you decide to make the moral decision and not kill somebody. So I don't know. Let's see. Competition. Be number one. Well, I think anybody who likes I don't find myself to be a super competitive person, but it does feel good to win. And I don't think that that has anything to do with whiteness. I think it has to do with, intrinsic systems within our bodies and dopamine and those kind of things, science, but science is white. So never mind. Forget all the Arabic science that was going on for years outside of Europe during the Dark Ages. Forget about that. Forget about all the science that was developed in the Chinese Empire, the Chinese dynasties. It's just ridiculous. Win at all cost, win or lose dichotomy, action, orientation, master and control nature, must always do something about a situation, aggressiveness, extroversion, decision making. Okay. Majority rules when whites have power. Well, I'm not really a majority rules kind of guy. That's why I like liberty. I I like the whole idea of having a republic because the republic means majority doesn't rule. That's called democracy, and that's called mob mentality. That's actually what the commies want. So communication, the English or sorry, the King's English rules, written tradition. What the hell is that? Like the Assyrians had written tradition, like what? The Egyptians, like oh my goodness. Let's see, all Asian cultures, African, certain African cultures, like I just said, the Egyptians, uh, the Mayans, the Incas, written tradition,
Yeah,
avoid conflict. Go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say the way we measure the difference between prehistory and history is when they started writing things down.
Yeah, no, no doubt. And I'm not a big proponent of the idea that men lived in caves, like all men. We lived in. I think that's just silly, especially if you look at animals. They nest in their own ways. They build their own habitats. Um, but I can see where men took refuge in caves or thought caves were sacred sites, and within those sites, they put depictions of animals, and this was before written language. So that in itself is a form of written language. Drawing a picture, it's a way of communication, and this idea that that we think about like a written tradition as being white is insane. What they're saying is, and it's what always what the commies want. They want that Rousseauian noble savage thing. They want to go back, and I'm like, cool, go back. Don't bring the rest of society down. Go live in the woods. Go out to Yosemite. I guarantee you can go out there somewhere out in Yosemite and find no one for miles and live on your own. Probably get eaten by a grizzly, but regardless, like you can do that if you want. But leave me out of that, man. Leave me out of it. Ugh. Avoid conflict, intimacy. I have no idea what that's about. I guess that's because the those minorities, they can't control their emotions and they have to attack people. I don't know.
I don't
Like I said,
under,
this whole thing like reads just reads as like white supremacy to me, you know?
I don't understand how they can claim that white people, colonized the entire world to create bland food while avoiding conflict. Yeah, that doesn't really
Right,
compute. That doesn't
right.
compute with me, you know. Like what we can't, we you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
we colonized India, so we get spices. Although we also we could cook bland food and avoid conflict.
We formed America to basically shorten the spice routes. And that's not to say I know what the SJW postmodernist type. Well, the Vikings were founded before that, and the Indians obviously found it. They were okay, I get that, but no advanced society had found it. In fact, the Vikings when they found it, they actually left and decided not to come back. And the as far as the migrant nations that came over that formed the natives, like, okay, well, the world was different. Than they didn't have advanced technology. They didn't have the freaking wheel. They didn't have horses. They didn't have beasts of burden like we did. It was a different culture. When Cortez came to the shores, they thought he was Quetzalcoatl, their god, their snake god with wings. That's what they thought. They thought it was a legend of Quetzalcoatl coming back. And Montezuma went and spoke with them, thinking this very thing because there was a prophecy in their culture. You know, those people would sacrifice the winning team in their sports to their gods, the team that won. It's like, what? Are you like I mean, I get it. I get it. Like they thought that this was a good thing that to be given up to the gods, but it's like that's insanity to me. And we can talk about how that's whiteness, but uh, you know, they're just different cultures. They were less developed. Yes, they had some built some beautiful structures and whatever else, but comparatively to Europeans at the time, technologically they were more primitive. Intellectually, they were more primitive. They might have had high IQs, but they did not have, or people with high IQs, but they did not have the thought and the philosophy and the religious structure behind and the cooperation that Europeans had built. And there's another factor as well, and that was geography. Europeans just happen to have great geography. One of the things that helped um, the Arabic Muslim nations grow was their religion, but their geography sucks. One of the reasons why I'm pretty sure we'll never go to war with Iran is because Iran is pretty much impossible to take. It's basically all swamp and mountains. It's a very difficult uh, place to wage war, and geography matters. One of the reasons why China became so developed is because yeah, they have mountainous areas and all, but they also have great geography. Outside of that. So, and it wasn't like the Europeans weren't, didn't struggle for centuries with things like the Black Plague and Muslim invasions and fighting amongst themselves even. So, um, don't show emotion because what you're I mean, don't discuss personal life. I don't know anybody who doesn't discuss their personal life. Don't and be polite. Well, should you be rude? Should I just come up to you and be like, "Hey, you jerk!" Boom, the jaw. It's like, come on.
Yeah, that's a pretty strange one. Like, I pretty much, I'm almost certain that every culture that I've ever heard of has a etiquette standard that they go by. So, I think we've kind of reached the point to where we can,
Any highly developed culture.
yeah, we've. I think the elephant in the room with this whole thing is this really doesn't make any sense. So, what are they actually trying to say with this?
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense only in that if you believe that ethnic minorities, cannot achieve any of these things, and only white people can. And they call the ethnic minorities that act this way, they're acting whiteness and they're perpetuating whiteness, and they're the race traders then. So, and to me, it's just absolutely disgusting because you judge an individual based on the individual, you know?
Yeah. Um. So why do you think they decided to take this down? Because they had it up for a while and then they said, oh, we're not gonna put this on the website anymore.
It got media coverage. It got media coverage. Look, I covered it on my other channel, number two, all minus one.
Uh,
Check it out, guys. Like, share, and subscribe. All minus one. You can find me on YouTube. I'm on other platforms as well, although I have not been uploading to them as much. Um, but yeah, like they got media coverage and they knew how ridiculous it was, and um, they also showed their hand because this is a government institution. I've heard a lot from military guys that the wokeness, the SJW stuff has been coming in the military, and that's absurd to me because now when I went to boot camp back in 1999, it was there was a thing where the Marines there were who were black, they would call dark green Marines. You know, as a joke. There's no black or white. There's just green and dark green. Um, but other than that, there wasn't any sort of racial lines whatsoever. In fact, my heavy hat drill instructor was uh, Staff Sergeant Archie, who later on became Sergeant Major Archie, who was the major of Paris Island. Actually, there's a video you can find on YouTube where he got in trouble. But that was an intense dude, and everybody respected that guy. I mean, he was awesome. But he, you just didn't see that. I was trying to earlier when we had technical difficulties. I was talking about my buddy Itabu, who I can't remember what country he was from in Africa, but he's a black guy, and he immigrated to the United States as a teen, went in the Marine Corps. I'm originally from Maryland. He immigrated to Maryland, which was a weird thing to find out. And when we were in Iraq, we sparred. So his uncle was like this Taekwondo black belt champion. And I had done at the time Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do and boxing and some Muay Thai. And we were just sparring like bare knuckles, going at it. And he was just amazing with these like spinning wheel kicks that would catch me. But then once he realized once I closed the distance, he couldn't stop my hands. So it was just this thing where we, laughed about it. We were just having fun sparring and good competition. But the guy, he was a Muslim who became Christian. Um, and he was a buddy, and it's like nobody ever talked about like race. I remember being on a mission in the unit I was in before that you know, I forget where the guy was from. He's from somewhere like Mississippi or Louisiana or something like that in the South. He's a black dude, and we would sit around and play spades or dominoes and stuff like that. And a lot of people think about spades and dominoes as black games. Spades being a card game, and dominoes, and for me, that's just like life. It doesn't. That's just like stuff we would do. So I just don't get it. I don't get the racist type narratives. I understand that there are different cultural narratives, but to say that white culture is white is it, purely European and not found anywhere else is just insane.
No, yeah,
So,
I think you're absolutely right. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking I've got more in common with, you know, black people throughout the entire United States than I do with your typical like Maine lobster fisherman. Like just because I feel like Southern culture kind of overlaps a lot of African American culture throughout the United States. So I just don't see it along these lines, and I feel like it's a little suspicious that they feel like drawing these specific. Oh, this is white culture. This is what This is what white people do. Well, I'm not like most white people. Even most white people out in the United States. So I don't know. I feel like they've got ulterior motives here.
well, yeah, I mean, I think we'll both agree it's the commies doing this. I mean, I made a video on my channel, all minus one. That was number three. I might have one or two more in me, but anyways, no, I made a video about Black Lives Matter um, earlier because it's really a communist movement. It has nothing to do with race. They're using race as this sort of point of division. And I get that the average person, you hear like, oh, police brutality, Black Lives Matter. And they go, well, it's emotionally appealing. They go, yeah, of course. I hate racism, blah, blah, blah. But they're not paying attention to what is actually going on. And that's how you get those useful idiots in. That's how you get your cover in to then subvert what is the current government. And so one of the guys I talked about was Manning Johnson, who wrote a book called was it Race, Colorism, and Communism? I think the title of the book. And you can find this online very easily. And it's not a hard read, but he talks about how he was involved in the Communist Party for 10 years and he finally left because of how horrible it was. And communists are uh resoundingly racist, like, because they're progressives. And there's this idea of a horseshoe theory. I want you to play this video that I had you queue up here in a minute. There's this idea of a horseshoe theory that we intersect at 2 points, as far as the right and the left. And it's absolute absurdity. It's just progressivism. Whether you're a fascist or you're a communist, it's just progressivism. Look, I expect the world to progress with technology and stuff, but there's a certain point where we have to say our morals need to be our morals. The way we look at people needs to stay the same. We can't break everything down in a postmodernist type way, in a neo-Marxist type way, where we're destroying every structure that we have that has built us up to come to this point. And I guarantee you, when we get to the point where we have embraced communism fully, there will be massive death, there will be massive poverty, and the only people that have power will be those in the party at the top.
No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Do you want to play this video that you're talking about?
Yeah, play it, man. It's awesome.
Okay, here we go.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial.
Oops. Let me start that over.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
Roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in. Black people should only shop at black businesses.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I.
So yeah, that's a pretty interesting take. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's more or less where I've always stood on it. They're both racist. The woke guy just doesn't realize he's a racist because he's saying it's his racism is against white people, and he's white, so therefore you know it, he can't be racist toward his own people, which is also stupid. But also they believe that whites have power, and then the end of it is the people with the small hats, of course. But doesn't that what it really always come down to? Like, so if you look at like Richard Spencer specifically, Richard Spencer's everything that he believes is a progressive socialist ideology, other than the ethno state, which I also would say is a progressive socialist ideology. Don't get me wrong. There are countries that have ethno states of sorts, like Israel. Japan's basically an ethno state. North Korea. China's interesting because it's an ethno state within the Han Chinese, though they have many, many different ethnic groups. And that's something that's never talked about today, or rarely talked about, is the Uyghurs and their potential genocide that's going on there. And where are the SJWs talking about that? They love China. Where are the Muslims who, like Ilhan Omar, who are speaking up against that? and China. She's not, because she likes the power of this communist potential utopia come in, and this power of this inversion of racial politics. And in my mind, I'm old enough to know that for the most part, the country got away from this. And I believe we talked about this in the last stream, and it came back, cropped back up, around 2010, 2012 specifically, with the internet. And eh, I don't know, man. It's like people don't understand in almost every communist or socialist regime, there's always been some sort of racial animosity toward one group or another. Or if you cannot scapegoat a race, like I talked about before, initially in Russia, it was the kulaks. No matter what, though, you're scapegoating somebody. You either need to make it racial. And so in the United States, it was easy to do that because of our past, whereas Russia has many different racial groups, and whatever, most of them were slaves. So it's like, oh, we're just all slaves, so it's not a big deal. um I think in the US it's much different. But what's even crazier is countries like France and England, which have a different kind of history of slavery. France outlawed it much sooner. Um, in England, uh, you know, has a much different history than like the plantation than the U.S. And this movement's still working there. So this tells me that it's global, it's organized, and if you listen to anything like Antifa has to say, they say exactly that they're organized. And then you see stuff on the news, and you have people like, not disparaging her. I mean, I understand she's not going to watch, 8, 12, 10 hours of news a day like I do because I'm crazy. But like, where she's like, oh, Antifa's not organized. They're saying they're not organized. It's like, yeah, they absolutely are. Like, they have websites, dude. Show them to you. Project Veritas infiltrated them. Steven Crowder infiltrated them a long time ago. And I think Crowder says a lot of dumb stuff sometimes, but he is funny. And I will take, if you want to listen to just someone who's funny, who has a just basic conservative take on things, like, Crowder's okay to watch. So I don't know, man. Yeah.
No, no, you're
What you
you're
got?
you're right. It's so we're talking about, like, communists and the kulaks and all that stuff, and I see a lot of these tankies on Twitter all the time talking about how, oh, the Holodomor didn't happen or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, communists believe in a certain, political ideology, and anytime that political ideology comes in contact with a culture, it's going to be an issue. So, you've got the kulaks who are just Ukrainian farmers who's been farming in Ukraine for, since Jesus was 2, and they've been and they're pretty self-reliant. They've got their thing going on, and then the Bolsheviks come in from Moscow and say, you need to turn over your farms. Well, no shit, they're not going to just turn them over. And of course, because they're not turning over their farms, they're not taking part in this collectivization. Ergo, they're counter-revolutionary. So I mean, you can say it. These guys try to pretend like there wasn't racial animosity, but at the end of the day, you've got a ethnic culture who has a certain way of life that is counter-revolutionary to the communist perspective. So they killed him. That's just that's just how it works. These guys don't want to deny it, but you know, it is what it is. That's what happened.
Well, look, I mean, those people are like more or less ethnically, they're cousins, but they're their own people at the same time. And so I remember I met a Polish man. I was out on a date with a girl a few months before I met my wife, and um, we ran into this guy, and we were at this bar, and he was chatting us up. He was a really nice dude, and he was from Poland originally, and he wouldn't tell us where he was from. And I kind of had a clue or a hint. And the girl I was with was trying to guess, and I was like, he's like, because he kept talking about how he hated the Russians, and I was like, oh, you must be Ukrainian. And he goes, no, we hate them too, you know. And so we went. we kind of went down the line, and I'm like, I'm thinking it starts with a P, and then she guessed some other, I don't even know what she guessed, and I'm like, and he's like pointing at me, he's like, yeah, you got it, and I was like, okay, um, but people don't understand these things that yes, these countries are kind of related and they have common ancestry, but at the same time, they still see themselves as their own, you know, individual people and people groups. For instance, the Cossacks in Russia, they were very specific people, and they were used by the czars to murder anybody he wanted, but especially to drive out Jews in Russia. And no, in part, the Russian Revolution was led by Jewish people, which the white nationalists will always point to, but it doesn't matter who's leading it now. And you could say, well, you know, those same people, the white nationalists will go, well, it's the blacks in America right now. They're leading it. It's like, is it? Because you know, I see a lot of, you know, people of European background sitting there saying stuff like, "Oh, yeah, Black Lives Matter," and you know, "Yeah, we need reparations, and we need this and that. We need to restructure our system and in capitalism." And I mean, most of Antifa are rich white elite kids. You know, if they didn't have, if they had a job, they wouldn't be able to go out and protest and do stupid stuff. And I mean, aside from COVID, obviously. So it's it's silly to me. All of it's silly to me. It seems so obvious, yet I don't know. Most people I hang out with, talk with, even if we don't agree completely ideologically on things, although I wouldn't consider myself an ideologue either. But if we don't agree totally on politics or the world or whatever, we can just chill and have a conversation. We can even agree to disagree. But most of them do not want communism, and it seems like this very loud group that's very organized, very pernicious that's doing this. And my thing is that we need to speak out. You know, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast and my other channel. Um, is that we need people to speak up. A lot of people are afraid, and I'm really not. I mean, I have my own reasons for not being afraid, but we can either let the revolution happen, and I do believe we are in the midst of an American Bolshevik revolution. Uh, it's the beginnings of. It's been going on. It's been building for the last 10 years, 8 years, and now we're really seeing the violence ramp up. We've still had, I think we're what, day 54 of riots, and I don't know. I mean, this might go on for another 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, wait till Trump gets reelected. Maybe he won't, but wait till he does. See how much further they amp this crap up. So I don't know, man. You got something to say about that?
No, I think you've kind of encapsulated, um, kind of where we're going with this. The issues at hand is that this whole trying to define white culture in this article that we're just looking at is, it was for a purpose. And even though they've taken it down now, it's warfare, like you're talking about. We are in the middle of a culture war or a cultural revolution.
It's psyop.
Yeah, yeah. So like you're saying, it's important that we really sit down and analyze these things because our side, more or less, we need to have the intellectual ammunition to understand where we're at, and that's why I like that we're talking about Moldbug. We're talking about some stuff outside of the normal right wing perspective because we kind of get, we need all the help we can get. I believe.
Well, that's just it. The whoever is on the right, that is anyone right of Mao, as Don from Plebeian Media likes to say, which he has an excellent channel, small channel, but does like an hour or hour and a half, 2 hours every morning around 10 o'clock or so. So, shout out to him if anyone wants to watch because he covers a lot of good stuff. Um, uh, 10 a.m. that is. Anyone right of Mao, it's really what it is. And because the right is individualistic, like we don't agree necessarily how to on how to organize our society completely. But we both agree on we don't want communism, and that's the main thing. And so if we can at least start there and start uniting and start talking and start letting people know and having people understand that it's not just it's not just, well, oh no, these people are protesting for this or that, or well, no, that's not the full issue, or we have to understand where they're coming from. It's like look, we can't treat minorities like kids. And that's the other thing with that whiteness thing is that's what we're saying. We're saying you being of some different ethnicity, you're you're inept, you're a child. You need the protection of the white savior. You need the protection of the white elite. And I find that condescending. Um, and I think a lot of people who I know find that condescending as well, who are ethnic minorities. And I even hate framing it that way because I don't want to talk about race. I don't want to talk about things like minorities and whatever. I'm fine to talk to anybody about culture and to say, well, what is, uh, how was your culture when you were growing up or within your family? Because it's interesting to me, because I'm interested in people and I'm interested in the differences between people. And focusing on race all the time is only meant to divide us. So I don't like even framing it this way, and I know the arguments on the supposed right against it. Now, some people on the right are will bring up certain statistics like crime statistics and all, and I think you need that for sure. Those crime statistics you need to put into perspective, and let's face the truth. But then look at how certain cultures breed weak communities or communities that are in trouble that need interventions. And we don't need to racialize it. It's something like 70% of black families in America are born without fathers. There's no father in the home. But there's 1% of whites that have no father in the home as well. And I don't know what the numbers are for Hispanics and Asians. I'm not sure either. That is systemically across the board an issue. So let's consider those things across the board and understand that yeah, that is more in one community or another, but it's not good. It's not good. And to have an infographic put up by the Smithsonian to say that a traditional style family with a father in the home is whiteness is just gross. And I don't know, man. I don't have much more to say about that. I'll just keep rambling and ranting. So
No, I think just kind of, I guess, to end on a note here is, we're talking about a lot of these guys on the right that want to point out racial issues and whatnot. We There's different races in this country. We live together. We have to get along, and I feel like there's been plenty of empires and things in the past that had different cultures and different races that were able to get along.
absolutely.
We have to
Yep.
find a way to do it, regardless. So we're reading these things where it's like you're talking about, you know, having a father in the home is a white thing. We gotta get away from that. We've got to get back to the point where we all agree, or anyone with sense agrees that having a father period is good, and then make that the culture in America, and hopefully we can get there.
Yeah, no doubt. And we need to get back to that creedal culture that America has to do with constitution. There's got to be some sort of value of classical liberalism. I know you lean more towards like a monarchist society, or you're interested in that idea. But we have to get back to that. And I don't see where through the course of history that we have in any nation or culture where the where collectivism has been beneficial to anybody. It just isn't. Eventually you devolve into the Rwandan genocide or something.
Right.
And there that was, black on black, but two different ethnic groups.
Yeah, given the right sort of issues in any given society, people are going to point out their differences and are going to disagree, and they're going to come to blows or violence or whatever. We need to avoid that as much as we can. And I believe we can. I still have a lot of hope that we can get along. Like I tell people when we're talking about these issues, this is not my culture war. I didn't want this culture war. I would
Right.
I would love for all of us to be able to get along, but it is what it is right now, I guess.
All right, Tank. Well, I don't really have much more to say with that. So why don't we get to the outro? Everybody, thank you for watching. We have, a few watchers. Not many, but a few. Um, but we will repost on YouTube. This has been The Ends Justify the Memes. And remember, the ends always justify the memes.
I walked away from the Republicans back in 2006. Once we gave them a trifecta from '04 to '06, they spent like drunken sailors, and they became, basically Democrats. So I walked away from them back then. Then they, half the country's wealth was stolen in broad daylight. September of '09, nobody goes to jail except Bernie Madoff, and he was stealing from his own people. Then, of course, they ushered in Obama to normalize Marxism in the United States of America, teeing it up for Hillary to do us in. Thing is that,